The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Good Will Hunting, where we will discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this fine 1997 movie. And joining me today on the panel are Father Chip Hines. Hi, Father Chip. How are ya? How are ya? You gotta say it like you're from like you're from here.
That's right.
And Andrew Hermiz, who's not from here. Hi, Andrew.
How do you like them apples?
There you go.
Was that good? No.
That was good. That was good. Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. And be sure to leave us comments there. We want to hear from you, what you think of our show, our discussion, and of the movie we're going to be discussing tonight. So we are discussing Good Will Hunting. This movie was directed by Gus Van Sant, written by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, starring Damon, Affleck, Minnie Driver, Robin Williams, Stellan Skarsgård, Casey Affleck got his start here. So great cast. And I should point out that, yes, Father Chip and I are both from Boston, I was born in Boston. Were you born in Boston, Father Chip?
Yeah, well, I was born in Medford, but
okay, well, close enough. Close enough. Metha. So we're from here, and that's a big part of it. In fact, I want to mention or discuss right up front. This was the movie that started the modern trend of like set in Boston movies, isn't it?
I think you're right. I was thinking about that when I was rewatching it because it's still, to me, it's still one of the best examples of that kind of movie too, because the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, I know that place. That place. I've been there. Yeah, I've seen that. I've done that. And the other part of it too was, I think, I can't speak for Andrew, but I'll speak for you. I mean, we've all known guys like Chucky and Morgan and all those guys.
I grew up with guys like that. Yeah,
exactly. Totally. We grew up with guys like that. So It was funny. It's funny to watch, and in that way. And, and all in all, I mean, some bad accents, Robin Williams aside, I thought it was pretty decent as far as that stuff goes.
I bet Affleck's accent in this was better than in the town.
I agree.
I don't know what happened in the intervening years. Maybe he was in Hollywood too long. But...
Too long in Hollywood.
But yeah, I mean, if we wanted to talk about like the bad Boston accents in movies, the nadir of the bad Boston accents would have to be Benedict Cumberbatch as Billy Bulger.
Billy Bulger. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was the worst.
I can't. I mean, he makes Robin Williams look like a dialect coach.
He does. But close second would be Holly Hunter in the movie Once Around, which is an obscure movie from the 80s. But the thing is, like as I was saying, this movie started the modern trend of Boston-based movies. Especially South Boston, really put South Boston on the map. And you get The Departed, and you got Black Mass, and you got like
Departed.
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 I'm gonna roll it out here. I usually don't let my Boston accent go all over the place, but here it comes.
Please.
I mean, the L Street, the bar, that
L Street Tavern,
L Street Tavern was a dive before. Now it's a tourist trap.
Yeah, it's a tourist trap / yuppie bar kind of place. Yeah,
it is not like the movie anymore. So
not anymore.
No. So yeah, it really did start that trend, and like you said, it puts Boston in a really interesting light. I mean, it's seen from the eyes of people who are from here, love this city. Affleck and Damon. I mean, we should talk about that. They started writing this, like Matt Damon started writing this as part of an assignment for a class at Harvard, which is kind of funny given the scene in the bar with the guy from Harvard.
Right.
But and this was their first effort at their first movie script and they won Oscars for it.
I know.
I mean, it's kind of astounding. And then when you think they have not done that since, I mean, they have not produced have they written anything? Do you know?
I don't think they've written anything together in a long time, if they have at all. Yeah.
No, they haven't. There is a movie that's, I think they finished filming that they did write together, but it got delayed because of the pandemic.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I got to look up the name of that movie. I'll do that here. But they did recently just work on a project that they wrote together.
Okay.
No, that's interesting.
I mean, it's amazing to think. I mean, there's some people who have one great, effort in them for, an author has one great book, or the one hit wonder musician. And it's almost like, I mean, they've gone on to great acting careers and they're producing and directing and that sort of stuff. But this really is the one script they produced. And it was, I still remember that Academy Awards where they got up there and accepted. And of course they had to do the, we won. How do you like them apples? That whole thing. So that was pretty awesome.
It's a movie called The Last Duel.
The Last Duel.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a true story of a trial by combat. It's directed by Ridley Scott, and it's written by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, and it's starring both of them.
Excellent.
It's going to be interesting to see, whether it measures up, whether it has what it takes, because, I think they wrote this from the heart. Good Will Hunting. It's interesting to see whether the intervening 20 years plus has changed anything. So interesting.
It's Good Will Hunting's kind of it's almost like a love letter to Boston in a way.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's interesting. And they imparted that vision onto Gus Van Sant's directing. And it makes you wonder, like, how much input did they have on any of that, or did they at all? But it was really, I mean, the scenes of the overhead scenes of Boston and in Cambridge and everything else, it was really cool to watch. And it was obviously done by people that cared about the place. They loved the place. It was really, really well done. And, and sometimes, it's funny, that Dunkin' Donuts where the kid was, where he plunks up the thing with the phone number for Skylar, that apparently just recently, within the last few years, changed hands, and it's not going to be a Dunkin' Donuts anymore. But it's sad when things like that
when
disappear.
They change. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be a Baskin Robbins or something like that, which would be interesting. Or no, it's a ramen restaurant now. So
yeah,
that's very Cambridge. So
very Cambridge.
So I do want to talk about like that how very Boston is, because a lot of times movies, when they go to a city, and let's accept Los Angeles and New York, those are special cases because they're in every movie. They're the background of TV and movies, basically. But when they and maybe Toronto, you could almost say. But when you go to a city like a New Orleans or a Boston, a city with a lot of character and history, sometimes you get a caricature of the city, or you get the tourist view of the city. I'm kind of thinking of that new movie that was out on Netflix, Ava, which was like the spy movie, the assassin movie that was Jessica Chastain, was set in Boston. It was just out in this fall.
Yeah.
It was set in Boston. It was a lot of beautiful, shots of Boston, but it's not really about Bostonians. And this one really captures, it's what's one thing, it captures the various parts of the city's makeup, and it's discussions of class, blue collar versus white collar, rich versus poor, town versus gown, that whole thing, the town versus the the university, and it's really embodied in two relationships: Sean Maguire, Robin Williams' character, and Lambeau, the Stellan Skarsgård's character.
Right.
The guy from Southie who went to Harvard, or MIT, I guess was, but didn't, have the success. Whereas the other guy, obviously European and had all the success, won the Nobel Prize of Mathematics, the
Fields Medal.
Thank you. The Fields Medal in mathematics. And so you have that disparity there. And then you see it also in the relationship between Will and Skylar. He's a kid from the projects. He's poor. She's a rich girl from Britain, a trust fund baby, literally, who's going to Harvard and going off to Stanford to become a doctor. That disparity. And I think it's very interesting because you get that look of the city, of the place, right from the blue collar construction site all the way up to the heights of Harvard and MIT.
Yeah. And all the different jobs that Lambeau lines up for him too, all the different people that he gets to meet or Chucky gets to meet.
Chucky's interview, that was awesome.
It's one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yes, that is hysterical.
Really
Retainer.
All I'm saying is I could have a couple $100 on my hand right now.
Exactly. Hey, Chucky, man, he's my favorite character in the movie, to be honest with you.
Although Morgan is pretty funny too, I have to say.
Double burger. Sitting in the back seat of the car waiting for his double burger. Casey Affleck really made an impression, apparently, in that movie because, his career really took off.
It did
after that. But he, I think that was his first one of his first major pictures. And he wasn't. Those guys weren't in it a ton, but they were in it enough. They made a huge impression. And they were very important to the story. But I think the Chucky character is the important character, really. I mean, he's the one who's Will's best friend, and they work together, or they do all these things together. And there's that pivotal scene, towards the end of the movie, where he tells Will, if you're still here in 20 years, I'm going to kick your butt,
Right. He's the one who
much more colorful language.
Yeah. He propels him. He's the one who of all of the people in the movie, the one who can really get Will to do the thing that's best for him is Chucky. No one else, not the girl he loves, not the father figure that Sean is, not the mathematician who has discovered his talent, but only Chucky can do that.
Yeah. And that's amazing. I mean, when you think about it, you got a high school kid from, a high school educated kid from Southie who breaks through to this genius and gets him to see the reality of the situation.
It is it's pretty wild. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is that everybody in this movie has some stake in Will's future. Every character, it revolves around Will, but it's so Lambeau, he sees Will's potential to contribute to science and human knowledge, but also to Lambeau's own future and fame. And it reminds him of his own lost opportunities after he peaked early and that was it,
Right.
Chucky, his stake is you're betraying all of us if you don't succeed. Your success is the success of all of us in Southie. Right.
Right. You gotta cash that lottery ticket.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He says that.
Yeah.
Skylar wants Will to leave behind everything he's known to be with her. That's her stake in his future. Sean wants Will to be more whole, to stop putting up a defensive wall, let people in, deal with the abuse he suffered because of Sean's own experiences along those lines. And so I think it's interesting to see these relationships. It's really a movie of these relationships that he has with all these different people. What do you think of that? Well, which is, I don't want to say which is more important because they all kind of contribute in a way, but what do you think of these relationships that he has with these different characters?
Well, it's really the driving force behind the whole movie. You first of all, like we talked about, like watching this film, you really feel like these are real people. Like even though you don't have to be from Boston, like you guys, like me watching this film, like it's hard to tell that they're acting. Right. It's like you feel like even though it's like a once in a generation type story of a prodigy like that. It's almost like you're watching a documentary, and a lot of that has to do with, how the relationships, work, how his friendships, like, even though like they can get into a lot of trouble, at the end of the day, he has a guy like Chucky who is level-headed enough to realize, what's going on, has that perspective, like, hey man, you gotta cash this in. You have this talent and you got to do it. And then it's just like a lot like how the movie is, the story itself is just, it's this amalgamation of all these components, like all these people in his life that lead him to the decision he makes at the end. Like, even though it's not like maybe a typical story like this would end up like, having text at the end of the movie, like he went on to,
right.
win
the Fields Pro medal. Right.
And all that stuff. Right. No, it's left very ambiguous, and it's not a sad ending. You're happy for the guy, and because you already know, because by that time you already know, like he's going to figure it out. What he had to figure out throughout the whole movie was not what he's going to do with his talent, but what he was going to do with all the demons he had inside. Because this guy was, I mean, again, too smart to not figure it out. And like you said, it takes each and every person, and Robin Williams' character, being from Southie and having that connection to him, was really the one, that, like, even intellectually, even though like he's not as smart as him, he knows way more about how to deal with the, all these struggles that he has. And he's never had someone challenge him on that level, because, like in that scene with Lambeau, he's like, "Are you kidding me? This is easy. This is easy for me."
Right.
Like, this stuff was never easy for him. And,
right.
And that was that was the key to unlocking his potential.
Why do you think Sean got through to him when the other therapists couldn't? What was it about Sean? Was it simply just they were from the same neighborhood and they could relate that way? What was it that made them connect?
I don't think it was that necessarily. I think that was the in, but the reality was he didn't put up with his, bull crap. He gave it right back to him. And I think that's what, over the course of time, gained his respect and his trust. And I think he was able to, Sean let him in too. He explained about his wife who had passed from cancer, and they really shared stuff together. And I think that trust brought them together closer and made Sean into the father figure that he became. And it goes into that scene where Robin Williams keeps on repeating over and over again, "It's not your fault."
Right.
And Will breaks down and finally loses it and realize, I think that's when he realizes, it's not my fault. Sean has my back. This is all, we're going to figure it out. It was that scene really had a lot going for it. And it not, Damon's crying wasn't the best crying in the world, but it was a good scene. But I think one of my favorite, well, I'm going to save it for later because I think you have a question about best lines.
Yes. So I will save your best lines for the end. We already know what some of them are, but yeah, I think it's interesting. You hit on a point there with when he got him to lower the walls, it was a scene about forgiveness, but Sean wasn't forgiving Will. It was Will forgiving Will. And I think that's an important element of forgiveness, is especially when we're angry, when we're bottling it up, and sometimes we're holding on to the pain because we can't forgive ourselves for letting it happen to us. I think that sometimes, irrationally, and we're not always rational beings, especially when trauma happens to us as kids, but we sometimes hold on to pain because we think we deserve it, because for some reason it's our fault. And that moment was, and Sean was getting him to forgive himself, and also because Sean was the first person who was trying to help him with no expectation of return, apart from Chucky. And that was the thing, is he was the first father figure, the first authority figure, let's say. It was like Lambeau wanted something from him, and even Skylar wanted something from him. She wanted love. She wanted what he could give her. But Sean didn't want something from him.
Right.
He just wanted to give to him. And I thought that was what got through to him in that moment.
Yeah. And I think forgiveness, speaking as a Catholic priest for just a second, I think one of the things that I've noticed over almost 17 years of hearing confessions is that if people are willing to accept that God forgives them, but they're not always willing to forgive themselves. And that's the hardest part, to get people to understand that they have to forgive themselves too for something that they may have done, said, or whatever. They hold on to it more for themselves than they do for anybody else. And getting them to release that part of it is hard. It's not easy work. It's God part is easy for a lot of people. It's the self-forgiveness that's hard for people.
Yes, I agree. I mean, even just first person experience, I would say that's my experience as well. Not nowhere near that level as we see in the movie, but also that Sean opens up about his own experience of abuse. I like those therapists at Harvard or at MIT or whatever it was, which was fun, how he manipulates them and turns them. And he was just a charity project to them. He was a favor, but Sean is literally had compassion in the sense of the Latin word meaning suffering with. That's what compassion literally means, is to suffer with. And Sean suffered with Will in that moment. And that was the beauty of that moment.
Yeah, it comes down to the point that Sean was making in, the park bench scene. He's like, I know you've read every book and everything, that's why he could, like you said, he could toy with all the different, psychiatrists and psychologists and all that, because he already knew what was coming. But he knew, like, he hadn't experienced anything outside of Southie. And the only things he's experienced were, the abuse and, getting into fights and, being silly with his friends. Like, outside of that, he hasn't experienced, he really experienced life. And if that's all he has, then, it's not surprising the way, he's dealing with everything from his talent to his love life to, to everything else. And he was, Sean was the only one that understood that. And I think that's why he also, throughout the film, like would implore, like, Lambeau not to press him so much on all the math stuff. And it's like, just, you got to let this kid, like, figure it out and do it himself. He gave him that freedom. Like you mentioned, like he had no expectations of him, like, coming back. He's like, you can come if you want, I'll be here. If not, whatever. And he was the only one that knew that was probably the only way you're going to get to him if you were ever gonna.
And he saw right through the facade, like in that scene in the public garden, it's like, I doubt you've ever dared to love anybody that much, when he was talking about, like, his own wife who died. I doubt you've ever dared to love anybody. And I don't see a intelligent, confident man before me. I see a cocky, scared kid, but you're a genius, Will. He's like, I'm not saying this to knock you down. I'm saying this to kind of pull aside the veil and see the real person in front of me so that you can see that. And so let's I can't read Oliver Twist and tell you what it's like to be an orphan.
Right.
So let's set all that aside and be real with one another. I think that's what he was trying to get at there. And I think that's what opened the door to later, to everything that happened later on. And it's interesting how the relationship, Will's relationship with these various people also helped heal these people, whether it was Lambeau or Sean, or, like, Lambeau had a revelation. Although we don't see whether he changes because of it. He tears him apart, like you mentioned, but we don't see what happens to Lambeau after. But we do see Sean is really healed by his connection to Will as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was an important part of the movie, I think, that Sean's life changed too, that Sean was able to see that he was holding on to his deceased wife very strongly, and he wasn't progressing further in life,
right,
because of that. And I think he was able to see that through his work with Will and come to a decision that he needed to put his money back on the table, so to speak, as they say in the movie.
Right. Yeah, they help each other release those demons that have been holding on to, like you said, Sean's demons of isolation and grief, right. Will's demons of lack of trust, and inability to form meaningful bonds with other people, experience life outside the familiar bounds of, Southie and hanging out with his friends and go, mopping floors and that sort of stuff. So it was fascinating to see how they helped each other. They healed each other through this relationship. And Melanie was telling me that she'd watched that's one of the reasons I ended up getting the idea of doing this episode. She had watched a series or at least a YouTube video by this therapist looking at the therapy in the movie, and pretty much saying, like, so I wouldn't recommend this line of therapy in most cases, like where he grabs them by the throat and pushes them against the wall. Right. That's probably a little over the line. But he does talk about like the effectiveness of connecting with someone on that level and getting through those walls and being real with somebody, not to score a point, not because you can be clever, the clever therapist, but because it gets through to them. It opens up the door.
That scene where he pushes him up against the wall, though, is powerful in the sense that he's showing Will that, listen, I may have gone to MIT and I may have a degree in psychology, whatever, but don't mess with me about my dead wife. Right. I mean, I will end you, he says. and that's pretty powerful coming from, and it's funny. The thing that struck me was, and after seeing it this time after all the Bourne movies, I was like, wait, Robin, don't mess with Jason Bourne, he'll kill you. But then you see him at Skylar's place with his shirt off, and you realize, ooh, this is pre-Jason Bourne for sure.
Right. He hasn't been working out, Joe. He's still a skinny kid.
Little skinny kid, yeah. It was funny to see that after all that he's done since then,
Right.
And I think we don't want to overlook Ben Affleck's performance in this movie. I thought his Chucky performance was really good. I mean, it wasn't the focus of the movie, but especially that there's a couple of scenes that really stood out to me. One was it's near the beginning of the movie when they're they're left the baseball game and they're driving down the street and he sees the guy that beat him up in first grade or whatever it was. And he says, hey, Chucky, look. And he's like, oh, all right, yeah. And Morgan's in the back going, we just got snacks, And he's like, Morgan, if you don't get out there after we're done with him, I'm coming back here to take care of you. And
That's right.
It was funny. And the other scene was when he was talking to Will at the construction site.
Yes.
And he was saying to him, look, you have something that we don't have. And, I love you and I always will, but you can't stay here. You can't stay here for me.
Right.
Don't stay here for me. Because in a sense, that's what he was doing. He didn't want to leave Chucky and the guys. And that was his safe spot. That was where he felt most comfortable. And he felt a sense of loyalty to them, I think, that was not necessarily healthy, but good in the sense that they were his friends and he wanted to, take care of them. He had that scene with Sean where he was talking about honorable work, and he's like, well, laying bricks is honorable work. And Sean's like, yeah, my dad did it for 30 years. Yeah, exactly right. It's honorable work. But you have something that is far above that can contribute to the greater society and to you. You have to do that. You're not being true to yourself if you don't do this. If you don't try to use your gift that God, basically that God gave you. He doesn't say that, but if you don't use your gift,
Well, it is an interesting discussion in this movie about vocation. I mean, really, that's another key aspect of this movie is the idea of, it does not mention God at all, but it does mention, but it does kind of dances around this idea that we have a vocation that we're called to. And sure, you have free will. You can do whatever you want. But if you're called to a thing, it's not that it's a sin if you don't, fulfill all of your potential, that sort of thing. But if you want to be happy in life, you want to be fulfilled in life, the best thing to do is to do God's vocation for you is the one that will fulfill you the most, to put it that way. If God has called you to, like, just as a, for example, if God had called me to the priesthood, but I ended up getting married and having kids instead, I'm very happy. I have kids. Kids make me happy. I have a joyful life. And this does, it won't take anything away from that. But if what he had done had called me to the priesthood, I would have had a more fulfilled life. If that was really my vocation, it would have been that much more. And I think that's what they're kind of saying here is, Will, yeah, you could break bricks, have a good job, get married, have a bunch of kids, hang out with your buddies, watch the game, and all that. But you have something that is so much more that will serve you, serve others. This is what you're called to do. And Chucky, in his profane way, really lets him know. I love. Well, by the way, that from that was Chucky saying, the best part of my day is when I pull up to your house, and then that moment before you come to the door, that little time when I might find out that you left, you gave me, like, basically the Irish goodbye. Yeah, I don't know if people know what the Irish goodbye is. It's where you turn around and they're gone.
Right.
Like that's how at least Boston Irish people say goodbye. They just leave.
Right. Exactly.
that scene in particular is it's one of the most, like, one of my favorite scenes, and it's so rewatchable. It's like, this movie, like Good Will Hunting, like it's one of those movies that seems like it was always on TV, like on cable. And if that scene was on, you had to, like, sit down and watch it. Pretty much any scene in the movie, but that one in particular, that one had such an effect on me that I remember when I was in film school, I recreated that scene for a project.
Oh wow,
cool.
So it's a scene that resonates, and it's when you're watching the film, you wouldn't think that would be the moment that clicks for him. Mm-hmm. You probably weren't expecting it. Like, they're just out in a construction yard, and he's just shooting it with him. You probably didn't expect Chucky to get so deep,
right?
But so it's really it's such a key moment that I always go back to, and Ben Affleck, I think, showed his chops there.
He did,
then, I mean, obviously they both went on to have, like, really remarkable careers that they're still having. And like we talked about in the beginning, this might still be their best work. I mean, they've done all these blockbuster movies, but this is the type of movie that's more rare and rare these days. Like, just the quiet, little drama, because these movies don't really. I mean, this is the type of movie that would come out on Netflix now.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And wouldn't necessarily have, like, the star power of Robin Williams. Who
was the big star in the movie.
Yeah. That was the key for this film getting made. I mean, he really was obviously a huge get. I mean, these two unknowns, Miramax, buying the script. I think that it almost never got made. And I think Matt Damon had just got cast in The Rainmaker. And I think that helped push the script back up in the ranks. And it finally ended up getting made. And the rest is history.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was the authenticity of the dialogue, of the interactions. And I think that really is important to note, because those times, especially among the group between Will and Morgan and Chucky and Billy, which is the quiet one, hardly said 3 words the whole movie, that their interactions especially felt so real. This was like hanging out with guys. This was like watching like you said, a documentary. The interactions they had, the way they talked with one another. This is sort of the way I talk with my friends back in high school, maybe in college, maybe not quite so much, but the flavor is in there. And so it's really, I think it's one of the things that made this movie so remarkable was the real feel of it. It wasn't a bunch of Hollywood guys pretending to be blue collar, guys. It felt real. So there's that. I also want to talk about Minnie Driver is so great in this. In fact, I was thinking to myself the other day, like, where is she gone? I mean,
that's a good question.
Like, she was so great in a bunch of movies around that time, and I mean, maybe she's decided to, she's made enough money and she wants to relax or whatever. Good for her. But she did so many big and small things around that time that were really good. What was the one? I really enjoyed was
Grosse Point Blank.
Gross. Well, yes,
that's one of my favorite movies.
That movie. That's one of my favorite movies too. Yeah,
so good.
It was another one.
It really is.
That was it was more of a sweet movie, but it was Return to Me, which was David Duchovny, I think it was.
David Duchovny.
Yeah. Yep. Another movie that kind of feels in the same realm as this one, in the sense of a smaller, more intimate movie about these great characters, like these very interesting characters and their relationships. So I remember that was really good. I mean, I guess I'm looking at her list of credits and she's been working. So, I mean, I don't know. I just haven't seen the stuff.
Yeah. She was in a TV show recently. Yeah. She was in a TV show recently on, I think, ABC or something, but she's been in stuff. She's around.
Okay.
It's not that she's not working, but I think one of her best scenes in the movie is in the bar, right? So
yes,
she comes over to him and says, she wants to give him the number, and she's basically calling him an idiot. What do you,
I've been sitting here
waiting for you to come over to talk to me. So, and you didn't, but now I'm tired and I'm going home. So, and her accent in the movie is really, I loved it. I mean, I love an English accent anyway, but she really was like, when she says, "Are you mad?" I'm like, yes, I am.
When he feeds her the thing about his 12 brothers.
Yes. Great scene.
And he comes up with the names off the top of his head: Marky, Ricky, Danny, Terry, Mikey, Davey, Timmy, Tommy, Joey, Robbie, Johnny, and Brian. Like everything is E until Brian.
Yeah, and he's able to repeat it.
Yes,
to repeat it. Yeah, she tells him to repeat it. And he does.
I saw a clip recently of him on one of the late night shows, and they asked him if he could still do that, and he did it.
Oh yeah. Well,
nice.
Yeah. He was able to do it again. Like, when he named them off, and the host was like, "Oh, all right." So it was really funny. I mean, I think Damon's a smart guy. I think he's.
Oh yeah. He went to Harvard.
Harvard, yeah,
exactly. But I think he's a smart guy, and I think he is, of the two main guys, of him and Ben Affleck. I think you can't argue that either one of their careers is really horrible, but I think if you were given a choice, you'd probably take Damon's career over Affleck's.
Oh, yeah. It was definitely the more stable one.
Yeah, exactly.
Even personally.
And personally too, right. Yeah. And I think, because it's possible that Ben Affleck got caught up in all the Hollywood, stuff. He married actresses, Ben Affleck married Matt Damon married like a regular person. Not in the business.
Right.
And they're still together, and they have a wonderful family, and it's very nice. One of the things about this movie, though, and I don't know if you guys picked up on it at all, you probably did because you're sort of wicked smart.
My boy's wicked smart.
My boy's wicked smart. Was the reference to Howard Zinn and the history. Yeah. Did you see that? And there was some other hints of sort of like secular feelings and secular political feelings and secular kind of living in the movie. And like I said earlier, like there's no mention of God. There's no mention of faith. There's no mention of any of that in this movie, which is unusual in a sense because it's set in South Boston, which you'd think would, it's pretty heavily Irish Catholic. Right. And you would think that there would be some mention of it. But there really isn't. And I just thought that secular humanist kind of quality of the movie was interesting, looking back on it. I don't know if you guys picked up on that or not.
There really should have been the neighborhood Irish priest character who should have been, there. And I suppose it might have taken away from Sean a little bit, but
he could have added to it.
Right. In fact, now that I think about it, like Sean really was the priest. In that sense, he was he played that role. He was the confessor, the spiritual advisor in that sense, but he was a therapist and not a religious, director, a spiritual advisor, which is interesting in that case now that you bring it up. Yeah, there was a decided dearth of that faith element in this movie, which does kind of take away from it a little bit. It does.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it would have been better with it.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think when you take away the faith component in anybody's life, I think it lessens it a little bit.
So we haven't talked much about Lambo himself. In fact, before I rewatched this, it had been more than a decade since I'd seen the movie, and I totally forgotten about Stellan Skarsgård in the movie. Like, his character is, I mean, it's an important character, it's an important element, but it's overshadowed by, Sean and all the rest. But it's interesting, and I do have to mention the teaching assistant, Tom.
Oh, poor Tom.
So creepy. He is so creepy. I'm sorry.
He's a little creepy, but he's also put upon, I mean, he walks in, the second he walks in and Matt Damon's Will's sitting there, he goes, "Hey Tom, can you get us some coffee?" I mean, just the second he walked in the room, And although I saw some of the creepy factor, but I also saw some of the compassion factor. I mean, there was that guy that was trying to explain that math problem, and Will was like very frustrated, and no, it's this, and this, and they blew the guy out of the water. And Tom said, "You're a very brilliant man." Yeah,
there was that compassion. I mean, he just seemed like sort of subdued. Or so the interesting thing about that character is played by the actress John Mighton, or Dr. John Mighton. He's a mathematician. In fact,
interesting.
He's the math expert on the cast. Like, he's the guy who knows the math. So
that's funny.
It's fascinating. But he's also a playwright, which is really kind of cool that he's got both of those things.
Oh, nice.
But I was mentioning Lambo, and it was interesting that the great scene in the bar between Lambo and Sean, their tug of war over Will, and Lambo's like, "No, Will has to be like that." What was it? The Indian guru?
Oh,
the who made the English guy famous, and Sean's like, "No, like," what was the great example where he's like, Lambo says to the bartender, "Hey Teddy, have you ever heard of so and so, the mathematician?" "Nah, never heard of him." And he's like, names himself, and then Sean does the other one, which is I want to get it right here because I want to.
I'm forgetting that too.
Yeah. So
first he says, "Settle a bet for us."
Right.
And and then he names Albert Einstein and someone else famous. And do you know who those guys are? Yeah. And then he said, "Okay, hey Timmy, do you know who Gerald Lambo is?" And he's like, "No." And he goes, "Yeah. Point proven." But still, that's not what Will's. I mean, he's using Will.
Yes. And then Sean makes the other point, which is, he says, "Hey, Jerry, in the 1960s, there was a young man that graduated from the University of Michigan, did some brilliant work in mathematics, specifically bounded harmonic functions. Then he went on to Berkeley. He was assistant professor, showed amazing potential. Then he moved to Montana and blew the competition away." So who was he? Ted Kaczynski. Haven't heard of him. Hey, Timmy, who's Ted Kaczynski? Unabomber.
Unabomber.
Point made.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Point to Sean.
Right. Which is the point is that if you push, like, yes, there is great potential in Sean. In Will, he could become a field medal winner and, go great places. But, you could also push him over the edge. He is not a well person.
Right.
Really, what it comes down to.
Yeah, he could easily be a criminal mastermind.
Right. Or just break down and, end up living in the woods, building bombs to kill people, like that sort of thing.
Exactly.
I mean, he could have a mental break. Yeah.
Right.
So that was a great scene. That was a really great scene. And another point where he yells at the Lambo, Lambo's like, "Hey, stop blaming me, Sean, for your failed life." And he's like, "I don't blame you. Right. It's not about you."
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to. It was for Lambo, it was all about himself.
Yeah, he was a very selfish person.
That was one of the great relationships in this movie, was between Jerry Lambo and Sean. That back and forth between them. Was another one of the.
Well, it was interesting too, because that relationship was somewhat healed as well through their interaction with Will, and and there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where he brings Will to Robin Williams, and And Robin Williams says, so how many psychiatrists did you go to before me? And he's like, 5. Let me see if I can name. And he just starts naming them off, and he's like, yeah. So it was funny.
Well, in a way, that's the sort of thing Will would have done. Like, he knew exactly what his friend would do and would have done, and who he would go to. You know, that's that sort of thing. So it's
right.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, so we named one of the things that we thought might have been, you could characterize perhaps as a flaw, the lack of a faith element. What else? What other flaws do you find in this film? What other lacks? I'll name like one criticism that Roger Ebert had. He said it's the individual moments that make the movie, but not the payoff of the movie. Like the payoff of the movie isn't the best part. It's these individual moments. But what do you guys think? What are the movie's flaws? What keeps it from being the best movie?
Well,
that's a very good question.
That is a good question. I wish you had sent that over before we started.
I don't prep my people. Come on, you're on the spot. I should have.
No, I guess that the faith question for me was a big flaw. Roger Ebert hits on something that I think is important. Because when you do put the scenes together, it isn't necessarily your the greatest movie in the world, but it does have individual aspects of it that are really, really fun. And for us, people that grew up in Boston and whatnot, we love seeing it, the scenes, we love seeing the scenery, and we like, we do all that. It's hard for me to figure out another flaw for the movie, but I guess I would have liked a better payoff in the Skylar-Will relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
If I was going to say anything.
I mean, they kind of leave it open-ended. It's like you kind of assume that he gets there and there's a warm reunion. But
right.
Yeah, what do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, that's the first thing that came to mind too. Was not necessarily, I didn't mind the ending. I rather like the ending.
I like the ending too.
Yeah, and all that. But maybe as good as Minnie Driver is in the film, like we discussed, I thought maybe she could have used a little more time, maybe a little more development of that relationship.
I agree.
Because it's not that it's unbelievable that he would drive across the country, to go get her, but I feel like if they could have developed their relationship a little more, then maybe we could have, that would have felt more, I don't know, not as crazy. Like it was a little nutty that he's like, I'm going to go in this car that's probably not going to make it all the way.
Oh no,
that beater! Oh my gosh,
there was no way that car was making it to California.
Not at all. Yeah,
he might make it to Connecticut. I don't know.
The Mass State line.
Yeah. And this is not. It's a pretty. Like, we're all having a hard time finding flaws in it.
It's a pretty good
almost
movie.
Flawless film.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's high up in their top 10 lists or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But and this would be up there for me too. But I would say maybe to gripe on, like, maybe the most popular scene in the film, the "It's Not Your Fault" scene.
Yeah.
It's kind of cheesy. Yeah, it's kind of cheesy. But obviously the point of that scene is pivotal. I mean, it's him, like we mentioned, him trying to not blame himself anymore, forgive himself. I think it does work only for the fact that obviously it's Robin Williams, Oscar-winning performance and all that.
Right.
And I think because Matt Damon's character is, hard guy from Southie, it takes away a lot of that cheesiness. Because if you just saw this in almost any other film, it would feel like a Hallmark movie moment, right?
Right.
Because on paper, if you read that scene on paper, like, it's not your fault. I know. It's not your fault. I know. It's not your fault. I know. Like, it's like you got to have two guys like really selling it,
and the director really has to see what it should be.
Absolutely,
yeah,
right.
So. I don't know. I think I just justified the scene as I was talking about it.
Well, that's the thing. I threw you guys under the bus on that one. But
yeah, and maybe this is kind of. I guess it was meant to be funny, but again, when they're fighting, when they get into that playground fight, when he sees the guy,
yes,
when it's all in slow motion and stuff, and it has like that operatic music, I was like.
That was
I laughed at it. I don't know if it was meant to be laughed at, but it was.
I think some of it was meant. some of it was meant to be funny, I think. But, you know, I think it's interesting that that Matt Damon was able to pull this off as, you know, it really goes to his acting skills because he's not a kid from Southie.
No.
He's a pretty well-off middle-class person from Cambridge.
Upper middle class even.
Yeah. And so, you know, we're not talking about a kid from Southie. We're talking about a kid from Cambridge that's doing the acting. So he was really good in it. Back to your point on Minnie Driver, I think the thing that kind of stuck with me on that was they hadn't really known each other that long. And she's like, I love you. And
right.
And you know what I mean? It's like, where did that come from? Because I didn't really see the love coming through. I saw like a relationship that was budding and growing and everything else. But then all of a sudden she comes out with the big L word and she's like, I love you. And I'm like,
yeah.
What am I supposed to say here? You know,
no wonder he ran.
Yeah. Because if you watch that as somebody who doesn't, I guess, who just kind of dropped off of a alien ship, it would seem crazy.
Yeah.
I think
there isn't a real good sense of time. If that's a flaw, that might be one I throw out there. I don't get a sense of how much time passes in this movie. Right. Is it a month? Is it 6 months?
Is it a year?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's actually if anything, because if it's a year, if they've been together for 6 months even, I buy the L word. If they've just been going together for a month, that's a little soon. So I think that's a valid criticism. Let's turn around and get to the easy part of our discussion, which is your favorite parts of the movie, your favorite lines, or your favorite scenes. We've all mentioned it already, but I want to kind of wind it back just a little before the "How do you like them apples" scene that sets it up, which is the scene in the bar with Clark, the Harvard guy.
Yeah.
Who tries to? Oh my gosh! He tries to show up Chucky as a dummy, and here comes Will and swoops in and totally
dismantles him.
Oh my gosh! I don't know that I say I knew guys like this in college because I knew some pretty nice. I didn't know anybody who's a real jerk like that in college, but you might have run into guys like this who they've learned a few things in a book and now they roll them out to make themselves look smart, you know. And that was that whole scene where Will's like, "You're just stealing that line. Do you have an original thought?" Like, right. You know, wait. So I love that scene. And then later on, he can go to Clark sitting in the Dunkin' Donuts, like, "Do you like apples?" And he says, "Yeah." And he puts the number on the window, says, "How do you like them apples?" And that has become a classic line that I use that. My kids know that line because I use it all the time. How do you like them apples?
That's right. There's a couple of scenes in the movie that I really, really, really love, but I think the scene, and this isn't just one line, but I do have a favorite line, but this one scene is when Robin Williams and he are in his office and he's trying to explain to him about how he met his wife.
Yes. I love that scene.
And the Game 6. And he's like, "You had tickets."
Fisk.
Yeah.
Yes.
He goes, "You have tickets to Game 6 and you didn't go?" and his excitement over it all, you know, like, "Oh, Game 6, Fenway," you know, and that excitement was really, it was like, when I saw it the first time, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, what was he thinking? He's nuts. I would have gone to that game, you know? And, you know, but that scene is important because it shows Will that there are some things that are, that there are some things more important than what seems like it's important to you, like sports. And B, it shows that, you know, like, there is love. You know, there is love. I love this woman. I loved her enough that I gave up something that I would have liked. Even though
he just met her, right?
Right,
He was willing to risk
everything, yeah,
right. And it was
to go see about a girl.
Yeah, and to go see about a girl. And then the end of that scene though is amazing. And he says, "Yeah, but Pudge Fisk, huh?" And he's like, "I didn't know he was going to hit a home run."
What's cool about that scene too is, like, you know, when they have that overhead shot where the furniture and Sean's office is like the bases, and it goes back and forth between the actual footage. It's really a brilliant scene.
And keep in mind, this is 1997, before 2004, when the Sox had won the World Series.
Broken, yeah.
So it had even more intensity then.
It did, and so that scene in and of itself was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And then I think one of my favorite lines in the movie is, it's a throwaway line, but it's Matt Damon comes in. He's been told he has to see a psychologist, and he comes in and he's like, "I'm pumped. Let the healing begin."
Yes.
He's
such a wise guy.
I know. That's like, that resonated with me so deeply. I don't know why, but it did. And it was like, oh, I can see myself saying it.
Well, that's really that was another one of the strengths of this movie, is the ability to take, these deep emotional scenes and then to diffuse it just a little bit at the end with a little bit of humor. Like after the forgiveness and it's not your fault, and they're hugging, and then you have a beat, and then Will says, "Does this violate the doctor-patient relationship?" And Sean says, "Not unless you grab my butt." Which was awesome. And it was
funny.
It kind of diffuses all that emotion that you've got at that moment with a bit of a laugh, and that's what makes that so brilliantly done. I mean, it really is great. How about you, Andrew? Your favorite line or scene?
Oh man, other than the ones you guys mentioned, I mean, obviously the park bench scene.
Yep.
Is great. I mean, just great acting. And then, to go back to the Harvard ponytail guy scene, another good line. Yeah, another good line is like,
look-alike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, you dropped $150,000 on a education you could have got for $1.50
in late
fees at the library.
I love that line.
That was a great line.
That was a good one.
I knew that would resonate with you, Dom. I knew you'd resonate with that.
Yes, it does resonate with me. Yes.
Yeah, the "I will end you" scene, another powerful scene. Obviously, all of that. And then another funny line is like, Will goes to Sean's like, "So I read your book last night," and Sean's like, "Oh, so you're the one."
Yeah. I've stolen that so many times.
Yes, I have too.
Because there were, I used to have this little show on Catholic TV about movies, and older people in the parishes would come, "I watch your show every week," and I'd always say, "Oh, so you're the one."
I wonder how much ad-libbing Robin Williams did, because he was infamous for his ad-libbing.
He did a lot, actually.
Yes.
And in the end, that scene at the end when he's reading the note from Will, that is a total ad-lib when he says, "Hey, the kid stole my line."
Yes.
Total ad-lib.
That great ad-lib too, because again, it's that diffusing of the emotion of the moment.
Right.
I want to say I really enjoyed the scene of Skylar and Will on their date when they're eating at the fast food counter.
Yes.
And she's like, "I bet you're hoping for a good night kiss." I loved their interaction with each other. It was so relaxed, and I love that relationship that they had, where they could really be real with each other. They could be down to earth, and then they have their first kiss while they get food in their mouth. And then she's like, "I think I got some of your pickle."
Yeah.
They had good chemistry.
Yes. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
They had good chemistry. That was good casting, I think, bringing her in. It was interesting that they brought in a Brit to take that role. It didn't have to be someone who was British.
Right.
But it was interesting that that's what they chose. And
I think it definitely had to be someone not from Boston, because I don't see Will being with the typical Boston girl.
That's some girl from Wellesley
on.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it had to be someone who was very foreign to him, not necessarily literally foreign, although that helps, but very different from his experience, from what he knows, and because that's one of the things that makes him drive her away, is he's scared of her being different outside of his experience. That's true. Yeah. What was the other, just him solving the math problems, the first one on the blackboard. Hey, Lambo said, "Hey, don't graffiti on people's stuff." He's like, "Hey, go to hell," or something. He walks away around the corner, and then they look and they're like, "He solved that. Wait, go find that guy."
Yeah, that was good. The whole movie has the interconnected scenes are really, really good. I mean, you can kibitz about the little flaws and things about it, but in the end, it's a really good movie. And Williams won an Oscar, for his portrayal of Sean Maguire.
Yeah,
and he probably should have. I think.
Oh yeah.
Very deserving.
I remember watching. He was deserving of Oscars for other stuff, but he did at least win it for that.
Yes.
And there was just the scenes. There's that scene where they give him the car for his birthday.
Yeah.
And it's in Bill played by Cole Hauser is like, yeah, the engine's solid, kid. It's a good solid car. Good solid car.
She's good.
Yeah. It was a really good scene. It was totally something that I've done with friends. You stand around with your buddies. Yeah.
Calling him kid. That is such a Boston thing. My friends do that. We all do. We just, hey kid, what are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an authentic Boston thing. Yeah, you're right. That was very good. That was a good scene.
It's a quiet scene.
I wish I had, or I'm remembering the Casey Affleck, whenever they're in the car together.
That was a good scene.
I wish I had a double burger. Who would have thought? Yeah, who would have thought that kid would one day win an acting Oscar?
I know.
And Damon and Affleck, they haven't won acting Oscars. I mean, they won obviously for the writing, and then Affleck won for directing Argo.
Yes. Yeah.
And Damon's and Affleck have been nominated, but Casey's the only one that's won. For another Boston movie, Manchester by the Sea.
That's right.
Which is
which
great film.
Which was a good
probably
movie,
the saddest film I've ever seen, but it's a really good.
It's a good
film.
movie. I liked those guys. Those were some of my favorite scenes in the movies when they were together. Just the kibitzing back and forth, and I don't get to do that enough. I wish I had more of that in my life now. I mean, you lose it. You lose
touch with people, and
you lose touch with people, and it's too bad. I mean, it was interesting seeing those guys at sort of the beginning, quote unquote, of their career, in this movie, and I think, and the other thing that got me to wondering last night when I was rewatching it again, how would this film have been different if Ben Affleck had directed? And that kind of got me thinking, because Gus Van Sant directed, obviously, and he did a great job. And I'm sure that Affleck and Damon had some input into the different scenes in the movie and stuff. But I wonder with Affleck, because Affleck's a pretty good director. I mean, he's not a bad director at all. I mean, he's an Oscar-winning director. He's a good director. It'd be interesting to see. It would have been interesting to. It's a total mind game, but just trying to think, like, what would this movie have been like if Matt Damon, if Affleck had actually directed it. So that's the kind of thing that runs through this noggin.
I would probably be maybe not much different. I mean, it would probably be like Gone Baby Gone.
Right.
He directed that film. He directed Casey in that film, and it's very similar. It's kind of it's a story set in Boston, right?
Yeah.
Or
Gone
outside
Baby
Boston?
Gone? No.
Yeah.
Is it not in Boston?
I'm thinking of the other one, Gone Girl. Gone Baby Gone. Yeah.
Right,
Gone Baby Gone.
Yeah.
It's set in Dorchester. Yeah. It's not Southie, but it's close.
Close enough.
Yeah. I think Gus Van Sant. Yeah. Right. Gus Van Sant. I think he's definitely not a blockbuster filmmaker. I mean, he makes a lot of. I mean, he's known for his like independent film festival type movies.
Right.
Very quiet type of film, I think a lot of you wouldn't get a lot maybe of those moments. There's like those scenes that might seem like throwaways but they're not. I mean, they're important scenes, like of Will just sitting alone, in his house. I think of that shot of like the dishes.
Yeah,
you remember that scene? It kind of zooms out, and then you just get these little glimpses of his house and how much of a mess it is,
and his life. Yeah.
And it's kind of, exactly. It's like an allegory to his life. I think a lot of those type of moments, maybe that ambiguous ending, with like the folk music over the credits, that's total Gus Van Sant sort of thing. Maybe little things like that would have been different. If Afternoon
Delight. Don't forget Afternoon Delight.
That's right.
Yeah. Afternoon Delight.
That was so funny. When that started playing, I was like, I don't remember this. Why don't I remember this? And then I just, and my mind always goes back to Anchorman when I hear that now.
Me too. Yeah. I can't help but think of
hear
Anchorman.
that song and not think of Anchorman. So.
Van Sant won Best Director for this, by the way. I mean, obviously, and Best Picture in '97. I mean, this was a big movie.
The big movie. It ended up being a big movie. It was
It was a small movie to make, but it was a big movie.
No, he didn't win. He didn't win.
I thought it said...
That's wrong.
Oh,
this is Titanic. This is the Titanic year.
That's right. This is the Titanic year.
I misread the list. He's a nominee. Yeah. Best Picture nominee, Best Actor nominee, Best Actress, Minnie Driver nominee in supporting role. Best Director nominee. Yeah, Titanic won.
Yeah, Cameron. Yeah, obviously James Cameron won Director, and Titanic won Best Film. And yeah, it won. I think it just won for supporting actor and
script,
right?
And screenwriting,
screenplay. Yep. So should note if you've listened this far, you've watched the movie, but if you haven't, this is not a movie for kids. There's a lot of a lot of bad language, and also discussion of intimate matters that, not really, it was unnecessary, frankly. I mean, some of it was funny, but it didn't add to the movie necessarily. So but it's in there, so just you don't go showing it to your kids. Don't show it to your kids.
No, please don't.
Oh boy. All right. Any last thoughts on this movie before we wrap things up? Any notes that you have?
It just, I remember seeing it in 97. This was even before I was in the seminary. So it was like, I remember watching that movie and thinking to myself, all of us have to figure out our lives on our own, in a sense. We can't do things for other people. Like you can't live for your friends, and you can't expect to, just that everything's going to remain the same, and that really drove that home for me, then, because I was in my late 20s, when that came out. And I think a lot of us in my age, we messed around a lot, as far as like trying to find ourselves. And honestly, I can point to this movie and say this movie helped me figure out that I needed to kick myself in the butt. Andrew, last thoughts?
It's a timeless film with timeless themes, and it'll resonate forever. And yeah, it's the movie that one of the most influential movies on me in my life. One of the reasons why I want to enter film school. And, that movie was definitely up there for me as an influence. And obviously the story behind it, again, these two unknown guys wrote a screenplay and got it made, and the rest was history. That's the dream of anyone who wants to get into filmmaking.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's something that, no matter what happens, if you have like a up and down career like Ben Affleck, or, a pretty steady, stable, successful career like Matt Damon, they'll always be known for, this film and the story behind it. I don't think that's something that ever be lost. And yeah, I think far beyond, well beyond our years and generations after us, this will still be a classic.
I have one last thing before we go.
Yep.
I think that this movie holds up. It doesn't seem dated. It doesn't seem old. The only scene, obviously, that kind of seems a little dated is the scene with them about Pudge Fisk. But that's because we've lived through 2004, 2007, 2013, and 2018. But had to get that in.
Sure.
But I think that it just holds up. It doesn't look old to me.
Right.
It's made in 1997, and it looks like it could have been made yesterday.
24 years. That's kind of amazing to think about. Yeah. One thing my last thought is it's just kind of a fascinating parallel, but Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are kind of Will Hunting, in that they're the kids who came out of Boston with this skill, who hit the pinnacle. They won the Oscar, the acting, the movie equivalent of the Field Medal, and went on to have that amazing career, which you hope Will did. So I think that's kind of an interesting parallel in that movie. So, all right. So let's wrap it up on that note. I do want to, before we go, take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, including Dante V, Caroline K, Jeremy N, Wendy T, and Bradley J. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of Good Will Hunting? What did you think of anything we had to say? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page, or send an email to secrets@sqpn.com. Until next time, Andrew Hermiz, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Good Will Hunting.
It's not your fault.
Thank you. Father Chip Hines, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom, and why don't you go have some apples?
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and I gotta go see about a girl. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on StarQuest.